Guilt is not a bad emotion. Guilt sometimes is functional, sometimes it's not. So when is it functional? When you're breaking a moral code, an ethical code, right? So you do something really wrong and therefore you feel guilty. And that guilt triggers self-reflection, and that's why it's adaptive. But when we're talking about your own inner rules, the rules that you have created because of the experiences that you had over time, well, in that case, guilt is dysfunctional.
This is By Joyan Season 2. I'm your host, Joyan Chan, and every Wednesday we bring you inspiring stories, powerful message, and fun conversations with me and my special guests and friends, and it's my personal mission to empower you to live and lead a life with joy. This podcast is for you if you're looking for more joy, courage, passion, and purpose in your life. Now let's dive into today's episode and get ready to laugh, learn, and live your life to the fullest. Our guest today is a highly experienced CBT therapist and confidence coach with a 10-year career dedicated to coaching and mental health. With a master's degree in psychoanalysis, a postgraduate diploma in CBT therapy, and a certificate in life and business coaching, she has channeled her expertise into the creation of her own coaching program aimed at teaching people, pleasers, how to get out of the trap to build more satisfying and healthy relationships with others. So she's here today to empower you to break free from people pleasing and live life on your own terms. So, guys, help me welcoming the CBT psychotherapist and coach, the one and only Ludwika Kolela.
Colella, yes. Thank you.
That
Thank you so
was
much.
not easy, your name.
Ludovica is fine. You pronounce it just right. Actually, you can call me Ludo if you prefer.
Ludo. Yeah, I love that. Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much again for coming on the show today. So since your work is all about people pleasing, perfectionism, and human behavior, my well, I don't mind sharing, and just being honest right off the get go, right? I'm a people pleaser, I find myself like to like always say yes, don't like to disappoint others. So where do you think people pleasing, like where is the root cause of having this people pleasing behavior?
So that's an interesting question. It's also a wide question because there is more than one reason why a people pleaser become a people pleaser. Um, so when it comes to people pleasing per se, people usually identify it as a personality trait. The problem is that we know that it's not really a personality trait, but more a survival strategy. So, usually, people pleasers in their lives, specifically in early childhood, have experienced situations in which they realized at some point that the love they were getting from people was kind of conditional. So that can be something that can teach people they have to behave in a certain way to be accepted. Okay, that can be one of the type of experiences that people pleasers can have. You don't really need a trauma to be a people pleaser, but people pleasing is a trauma response after all. Meaning, at some point in your life, you felt your identity, yourself, was in danger, and so you responded with this kind of trauma response, which we call fawn. Fawn response means I'm going to shrink my personality, I'm going to hide. That's done to appease the abuser, so that I avoid conflict and I make them happy. Okay, so that is the response that kicks in. And you just need really a selfish enough parent or someone, an experience in your family where maybe someone was really unwell or their needs were came before your own, so you couldn't really think about how you felt because you had to think about how they felt first.
Mm.
And so people pleasers slowly lose that connection with themselves because they tend to put other people first. And they think that that's going to be helpful for them to build good connections with people, but that's not really how it works, because if you lose sight of yourself, you don't know your needs, you don't know your preferences, your wants, your your inclinations, even your emotions. And I get that a lot in the sessions with people when I ask them, how do you feel about X, Y, and Z topic? And often they're like, I don't know, I don't really know. Because there is that lack of self intimacy, almost like they spend lots of time thinking about other people and not enough time thinking about themselves. And that's why sometimes saying no or setting boundaries is a struggle. Not so much because it's a struggle to actually, voice the word no.
Mm.
It's more that they kind of became flexible and agreeable. So they turn out to become this personality that basically gels well with people, and so everything gets built around this trait that people pleasers think is a trait but actually is a trauma response.
All right. Can you perhaps give us an example, maybe from one of your clients, how maybe an example of their childhood and how it turned into a trauma for them to become a people pleaser today? Like, is there like a story or example?
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying before, you don't even need a trauma or traumatic childhood to become a people pleaser, but you may experience situations in which you were only praised when you did very well,
Okay.
or you were only praised when your manners were good, or you were kind of maybe you were the first of three siblings, three children, and you had to take care of the other people as well, and kind of you put your needs aside for them, for other people. So it can become, I mean, at some point you realized I have to put myself aside to please others, because that's how relationships are built. That's how I get the love and the acceptance that I deserve, and that's how I am embraced as a person. So from that onwards, really, you just need to repeat this enough times so that it gets embedded in your brain and it becomes the automatic strategy that your brain utilizes when you feel in a position of threat. And in this case, threat is also a very wide concept, really, because what's a threat for a people pleaser? It depends really on the rules that you hold about people pleasing. It can be, I want to make people happy all the time. It can be, I need to help people all the time. It can be, I need to be accepted all the time. I need to avoid conflict. So these are the most common rules, let's say. Okay. So if you find yourself
Sounds very familiar to me.
yeah, you see, so if you find yourself in a situation that triggers these rules, so you maybe have an altercation with your husband, your partner, your friend, and then a conflict can come out of it, then you're going to form response. So in order to appease the other person, you just put yourself aside and you give them more space.
Right. So I understand you help people to not even cure, because this is not really a disease, right? Maybe to reconnect with themselves, right? And so how do you help them? Like, what is the first step towards becoming their true self instead of you know pleasing others all the time?
Yes, so people pleasing, as you said, is not a diagnosis. So it's really, this needs to be really clear, but unfortunately can make more people more vulnerable to develop anxiety and low mood,
Okay.
because obviously all these triggers are stressors after all, right? If you think a conflict with a person can lead to the breakup of the relationship, obviously that is a trigger for anxiety, and like that many other situations. And low mood, unfortunately, also comes into place because we do realize at times that we are disconnected. We do understand that some of the relationships we have, if not all, are actually built on self abandonment. And there are moments in which we ask ourselves, and this happened to me as well. So, if I put myself first, what happens to this relationship? You know, if I stop compromising, if I stop putting myself aside, or if I stop coming towards this person, what's going to happen? Are they going to do the same for me? And sometimes the silent voice inside of you says, probably not. And so that's when, so that's often critical event, like a trigger for people to reach out for help, for a coach, for a therapist, because they realize that something is not right here. But with the like with any behavior, it's not really just the behavior, right? It's all the beliefs that maintain that behavior. It's the behavior itself as well, but it's also the emotions that that behavior carries. So as we were saying before, there are several rules that people pleasers might have that we just mentioned, like I need to avoid conflict, for example, or I need to be perfect all the time in a relational context. So these are the most common rules that people pleasers have. So we need to take these rules, we need to dig for them, we need to grab them and reconstruct them. And how we reconstruct them, basically, we reframe the way that we're looking at some of these concepts. So, setting boundaries, is that really breaking relationships, or is increasing the intimacy in your relationships because you feel more confident? Saying no, is that really a deal breaker, or maybe you're just it's just you protecting your energy? What are your beliefs about these behaviors, and also what are your beliefs about yourself? Do you think you should make people happy all the time, and why is that? Where does that come from? In what ways is this rule unreasonable? Where does it come from? Where did you pick it up, basically? What are the advantages of this rule? And what are the disadvantages, really? What cost you over the years to follow this rule? And then we try and make it a little bit softer, basically. So, do you need to make people happy all the time? Maybe we could say, oh, it would be nice if I can make people happy most of the time,
Yeah.
right? So we start reframing it a little bit, and we start saying how the person aligns their behavior with this new rule. So if you thought, okay, I can make people happy sometimes, what would be different in the way you relate to people? Maybe I would be setting more boundaries. Maybe I would say no sometimes. Maybe I would be more assertive. So really it depends. We need to tailor then the sessions, obviously, on the person. We can't really reason with blanket rules, but we start with that. We start with identifying these very sneaky, deeply rooted rules. And we want to reframe them, deconstruct them, and create new rules that are more reasonable, really more realistic as well.
Okay. So I personally struggle with saying no, and I noticed that. I really noticed that, and I have learned to say no, right? But how do we, as people pleasers, how do we say no without feeling that ickiness, or without feeling guilty, like without feeling that I should actually say yes? Like how do we do that?
Yeah. So, well, the first thing that I want to say is that we should reframe also guilt.
Okay.
Guilt is not a bad emotion. Guilt sometimes is functional, sometimes it's not. So when is it functional? When you're breaking a moral code, an ethical code, right? So you do something really wrong and therefore you feel guilty, and that guilt triggers self-reflection, and that's why it's adaptive. But when we're talking about your own inner rules, the rules that you have created because of the experiences that you had over time, well, in that case, guilt is dysfunctional,
Mm.
or let's say not functional, because essentially if you have a rule like I must say yes all the time, or I must be available for people all the time, and then you break that rule and you feel guilty, guilt is a normal part of the process of change in this case, but you're not breaking a moral code, you're not being mean, right? You're
Yeah.
not harming anyone. Actually, we could even say that by saying yes all the time you were harming yourself, but you didn't feel guilty in this case, in that case, right?
Mm. Yes.
Exactly. So guilt is tells us that there is a change happening and that we should be going down that route. Obviously, there are also strategies to manage intense emotions, and we would never start when we build behavioral experiments with people. We never start from, okay, let's go and say no to your mom. I don't know. We don't start from, very high stakes situations. We start very low stake. And we start with a formula. So what I like is to use people pleasers' strengths to their advantage. Okay, so people pleasers are really empathic people usually, so they pick on emotional cues, facial expressions, so they know most of the times they know how people are feeling, and Sometimes a disadvantage, sometimes it's an advantage, like in this case. So, what you want to start with is acknowledging their emotions. So, you want to start with an empathetic statement, and you want to say things like, I understand that you need my help, or I appreciate that you're struggling, or I feel your pain right now. Okay. So the person on the other side feels seen. That's what you want. They feel seen. You are understanding them. Then you set the boundary. So you can say things like, I'm at capacity now. I'm actually very busy right now. I'm juggling few things right now. I cannot help. Okay. So that's the clear boundary. And that's the second step. The third step is you can give a soft rain check no. Something like, maybe not today, but what about tomorrow?
Mm.
Or can we circle back another time? Or can I help you maybe later on? Do you want me to call you tomorrow to kind of talk through this? So you are not helping them in that moment. You're taking time in that moment for yourself. You're saying a no, but it's not a categoric no, black and white no. It's a rain check no. Obviously, there are some situations in which you can't give a rain check no, and it will be just a no. And that's, I guess, the hardest thing. But obviously, it comes to case by case, let's say. So we need to see what the situation is. But then you could say things like, thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate it. So you express the gratitude to them.
How to tell the difference between being kind and being a people pleaser?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes they are the same.
Yeah, the thing is that there is one crucial difference, and people, especially people pleasers, miss it because they are on the other side. But the thing is that kindness is a value, people pleasing isn't. So, kindness in being a value is also self kindness, so it includes you. People pleasing doesn't really include you. Actually, you're exclusive, so you're not really part of the thing. So it's about pleasing other people, but not yourself, and that's why it's a problem, right? So
Yeah.
you want to include yourself among the people you show kindness to. If you are at capacity, if you're busy, if you cannot help someone, and you say no to them, that's an act of kindness towards you, but it's also an act of truth towards them. So you're being authentic in that moment. What's
Mm.
kinder than that, to show reality?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, you can't really help, you can't help everyone, right? There's a saying. But the thing is, as a people pleaser, I know I can't help everyone, but I still want to help everyone.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, is one of the syndromes as well, right?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we need to deconstruct the rules. What rules do you have that make you think that you need to help everyone to be worthy? Or to maintain your relationships. The fact that you want to do something doesn't mean you should be doing it. Once you do the cognitive work around what's realistic, what's accurate, and what's actually a very high unrelenting standard, then you will be better able to align your behavior with your new way of being. It's a commitment that you do to yourself for yourself.
Yep.
You know that some of these emotions, like, I really want to, or maybe feeling guilty, these urges of wanting to help will come up because it's like a smoker that stops smoking. It's not like the the desires disappear from one day to another, but every time they feel the urge and they don't smoke a cigarette, like a neural pathway within their brain is dying, a neural pathway that was linked to the behavior of smoking. So you are actually training your brain to become to a new way of being. Essentially, it's not going to feel particularly pleasant initially, but this is a long game. Right? So if you are a people pleaser for all your life, you know very well what you get.
Mm.
If you change, you don't always know what you get, but you know that there will be some pains involved. But trust me, it's a short term thing. There's a long term gain to look forward to.
So what is the downside? I mean, when you talk about the long term and the short term pain versus long term gains, So for anyone who is listening, I believe I'm not the only people pleaser out there listening to this, right? So what is tell them about the long term pain if they don't change this behavior? What would happen?
Yeah, I think that if you speak to a people pleaser and you ask them, what are your pains right now?
Yeah,
They will be able immediately to tell you a list of what's happening to them, starting from the anxiety that I was mentioning before, from the fear of abandonment, from the fear of judgment from other people, not being accepted. These are all fears that are maintained by the behavior of people pleasing. Once you start being authentic and connected to your own truth, you don't care about judgment. You don't care about rejection because you know that every rejection is a redirection, and you know that no one who really loves you is going to abandon you. The relationships that will end if you set boundaries are only the toxic ones, and we cannot stop that.
yeah,
The good relationships, the healthy ones, will be better, will become better. So, you can just ask a people pleaser right now, do you feel like you can continue like this for the next 10 years? If they tell you no, well, they are ready to do the work.
right.
Sometimes we just need to reach that point in which we realize that's not right anymore.
So what is really the work? Like what is the work that we need to do? I know you are a CBT therapist, and how do we rewire, let's say, rewire a childhood trauma response, for example, or even a negative belief about ourselves and make it stick? Because I can tell myself, like, do the mirror work and say, I'm confident, I'm not, I am worthy. I can keep saying that, but it doesn't, it's not gonna stick. So, what is
Yeah.
really the work that you help people do?
Yes. So there are a number of ways. My favorite way is to start from the beliefs, like we were saying before, but not with statements and affirmations. Because, like, obviously, if you believe that you should be helping people all the time, and you look at yourself in the mirror and you think, no, you matter too, probably the first day is going to work, is going to make you feel better, but then the second day is not going to work anymore because your mind is going to be, what's happening here? This is a belief that we never had, we never heard of it, we are going to reject it, deny it, filter it out. Never happened. So you're playing against your brain in that case. So what you need to do is actually, you need to soften the beliefs that you already have. And actually, this is a work that you do in a one-to-one session, because you need to find, together with the coach or the therapist, you need to find out what's the best new rule, new belief that I can incorporate within my already formed belief system that is not going to get rejected by my mind. Okay. So, like we were saying before, similar to what we were saying before, even if I feel like I want to help people all the time, I matter too, for example. Right. So that recognizes that there is a need for you to help people, but you need to help yourself first, because that's, you're going towards kindness. Right. So
Mm,
that's something else. You want to identify what your values are. If kindness is one of your values, then show it to yourself, because otherwise it's incomplete.
yeah.
So we need to take you towards, from being quite rigid with these beliefs to being softer. And when you're softer, then you start applying the behaviors, the experiments, the strategies, and you start like saying no more often and setting boundaries, etc. And you start creating this new identity for yourself. So it's really a structured work. There's no like one technique that you can use. And I don't like selling one technique type of stuff because I think that's a bit that makes people believe the wrong things, like the wrong message comes across. This is a very important deep work, and it cannot just be done with one strategy or saying like sentences in the mirror, obviously.
And everyone is different, right? And let's talk about being a perfectionist now, because is it common that, because I'm also a perfectionist, so is it common when oh my goodness, and then why is a people pleaser often also is a perfectionist? What is the link? Yeah, what is the connection?
Look, that's what I also see in my clients. I work mainly with people pleasers, but I have to say the amount of time that people pleasers come into the session with perfectionist tendencies is appalling. Like 80% of people pleasers have perfectionist tendencies, but that's essentially what we were saying before about the belief system being very rigid. So you need to become a character to be loved and accepted and worthy, right? So that's when you relate to other people, that looks like people pleasing. If you're going to uni, taking your exams, if you're going for a promotion, if you're going for a big job, that turns into perfectionism. But it's always the same social mask that you're wearing, really. You need to be in a certain way, otherwise that's not enough.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean? So they are linked in the way that they both require you to be compliant to these rules, and both require you to have very high unrelenting standards. Because I need to make people happy all the time is not so different from I shouldn't be making mistakes at all,
Yeah.
which is usually a rule that a perfectionist would have. Or I should be productive all the time, for example. That's something else. Where did you pick that up? Who made you believe that was the
No, no.
way?
I'm also trying to find out, so that's why I was so excited to have this conversation with you, because I know I'm a perfectionist, I know I'm a people pleaser, but when I ask myself, where does it come from? Who taught me to be a people pleaser or perfectionist? I had no idea. I could maybe because I was, being an Asian, our parents were always, be very hard on us, you have to be a good girl, be quiet, things like that. Right? Yeah.
Exactly,
And
exactly. So
that,
you
yeah.
see how many conditions are put on children.
Mm,
Children pick that up immediately because as a child, your survival depends on your parents. So you want to become anything they want.
yeah.
You don't ask yourself questions, you don't challenge them.
Yeah. So how do you help perfectionists to not to be a perfectionist? Like, because it's so hard. And why is it actually a form of self-sabotage?
Well, basically, let's say you have a high standard that you should know everything all the time. Okay.
Mm,
Let's say this is your standard. So if at first you identify the standards. Okay. If you have that kind of standard, there are really three things that can happen. Either you try your hardest to know everything about a certain topic. So let's say if you're working in a corporate marketing company, wherever, you need to know everything about your role, everything about marketing, right? So you study a lot, you work a lot. And that's one thing that can happen. Obviously, that's a behavior that in the long term is going to lead to anxiety. So you will feel anxious at some point and be like, why am I anxious? Because you've always lived like that. You don't really know, right? And so you strive to achieve the standard. If you achieve the standard and you succeed, that's great. It's going to feel good for a short amount of time before you reappraise the standard and create a new one, probably even higher.
yeah.
Another thing that can happen is that you strive to achieve the standard, but you fail because the standard was the problem, was never your performance. But then starts off a cycle of self criticism. So that you start thinking, I'm not good enough, I'm bad, etc. So that is the real core belief that is behind all of this. Thinking that you're not good enough will lead you to do these kind of things, to pretend that you need to know everything, or to not wanting to make any mistake, to want to appear in a certain way to other people. And then there is a third thing that can happen, that you avoid doing the thing altogether. So if you think, for example, oh, I want to learn to play the piano. I
Mm,
had a client who loved music, never learned an instrument because she was a perfectionist and she was thinking it doesn't matter, like I'm not good at it. So I tried a couple of guitar lessons, piano lessons, and never really felt good. But she was a learner. Obviously, she would make mistakes, but she couldn't deal with the mistakes. So she just dropped it and never actually did it again. So perfectionism can stop you from doing the things that you do, that you like. It can stop you from even getting better at things, because obviously to get better, sometimes you need to fail. Like failure is not part of the process. Really, it's the process of learning. And
yeah.
so that's how perfectionism can be harmful. And obviously, when you talk to a client in a session, you talk through their examples, their lives, what happens to them, how perfectionism was harmful to them. So that will increase the motivation and also the awareness that actually there's something here that needs to change. Maybe this rule about I need to know things all the time, I need to know everything all the time, maybe it's not helping me as much as I thought.
Yeah. So in the moment when a perfectionist feels anxious or paralyzed by that, by the need of I need to get it right, which happens to me often. Like I need to get it perfect. Like it has to be done perfectly, right? If not, I will feel anxious. No, we tend to feel anxious or just paralyzed by the fear of not being perfect. What in that moment? What is one shift, or what can we tell ourselves so that we can start to to change this behavior anyway?
The first thing I would ask you is what's perfection? What's
Mm.
perfect? Is it ever going to get perfect? Let's face it. Oh, you're going to like deliver the job 1 minute before the deadline because you just couldn't work on it anymore.
I think it's like in our mind there's this picture perfect version of what is perfection. Yeah,
Exactly, exactly. And the problem is that you said two very right things. The first thing is in our mind.
yeah,
And the second thing is there's this picture, and it's actually an idea that people have of perfection. And unfortunately, it's mutable. It's not fixed at all. Otherwise, you would reach perfection at some point and then move on. If that was helpful, at some point you'll feel like, oh, this is really perfect. But then usually it's just a matter of time before you start worrying about it again. Can I make it better? Is it really perfect? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? You were thinking about something. I saw your face.
yeah. I mean, let's take for example, doing a podcast because that's
Mm,
what I do, right? And I know, of course, what I know when yeah, of course, we edit the podcast and things like that, but I know it has to be done a certain way so that it is polished and or
mm.
there is a standard that I strive for, right? And to me, yeah, of course, I wear my perfectionist as a badge of honor. This is like my standard. I have a standard, for all the work that I do, including the graphic, the content that I put out, all these, and I feel like being perfectionist, it kind of served me in a way when it comes to doing the work like podcasting and content creation.
Yeah.
So, but of course, there is a limit. I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah. But that is the issue that perfectionism is, especially when it comes to career, people feel it really helped them. So it becomes really, really difficult to challenge
yeah,
because it's also socially condoned. Like society wants you to be a perfectionist, so everything around you tells you, "Oh, your podcast is great, your graphic are
yeah,
just perfect," and you're like, see, that's because I worked on it for hours.
yes,
But maybe your podcast is beautiful and your graphics are perfect because you have good taste and you're good at what you do, not because you worked on it for 20 hours before,
yeah,
posting. So that's why the first thing that we say, if create a list of behaviors that you feel are triggered by perfectionism, and let's start by changing these behaviors little by little. Because if you, let's say, now I'm taking you as an example, if you worked on 10 hours, let's say, before publishing a podcast for an episode, all right? Then the episode goes well, it gets views, etc. Then you're like, that's the way to work, right? So next time I'm going to work 11 hours because it's clearly working. But when we start changing these behaviors and we say to ourselves, okay, this time I am just going to post or stop working on the podcast episode when I feel is 80% correct, 80% right. Okay. And that's an experiment that I'm going to make. And I'm going to put it out there and whatever happens. And if the same thing happen, that it gets viewed, it gets downloaded, like people praise you, etc., then it means what? That there was lots of extra work that was going into that. That actually was just unnecessary. Was the pressure, the anxiety leading you there, but you didn't need to be there.
but I think if I were to put out an 80% work, I won't be able to sleep. It happened to me before. Like I just couldn't sleep because of that something or an email I wrote or something I sent, and I just like, oh my god, I need to get it done so that I can sleep peacefully. Yeah, tell me about.
Yeah. But these are the behaviors that next time something like that is going to happen, you're going to feel like you have to get up from your bed and do the same because that's what you did the first time. And your brain is happy because in that moment you were stimulated, you were anxious. So as long as when we feel anxious, first of all, the mind just wants anxiety to go away. So it will do whatever. It will tell you to do things just to make anxiety go away. And whatever you do, if that anxiety goes away, for your mind is good enough. The mind is not necessarily logical, just wants to be okay. Status quo, no big emotions. So big emotion, anxiety, let's go and write the email again. Did that work? We feel better, so I'm assuming it worked.
Yes.
But actually, it was just that behavior that now will get reinforced, because next time you're likely to feel the same way
Yeah.
and do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I mean, this conversation has been so helpful to me
Thank
personally.
you.
Is there anything that you really want to talk about? Perhaps I didn't let you or didn't ask you.
No, actually, it's yes, I work with people pleasers. I mainly work with women people pleasers because we tend to be apparently more pleasing. However, I see many men also in my sessions. And what I want to say is that, because from my website, it can come across as a bit feminine. Men also people please a lot. But the fact that women are somehow conditioned more towards self-sacrifice, self-sacrifice from society in
Yeah.
general. Okay, so women should put themselves aside for the greater good. And probably this is something also that somewhere biologically we have, the idea of creating things, creating families, creating business. So we are creative like that. But the thing is that it doesn't mean to self abandon. It doesn't mean that. It means that you are actually in tune with yourself so much that you listen to your intuition, you are able to be spontaneous and authentic. And from there, you create. You don't create from being tired, from being exhausted, burnt out, or from thinking about other people first all the time, because at some point that's going to leave you just disconnected.
Yeah. For people who are listening to this episode, what is one thing you want them to do right after this episode?
What I want them to do is to sit down and focus on themselves, maybe closing their eyes if they feel like it, and ask themselves these three questions. What's coming up for me right now? What emotions do I have? What thoughts do I have? And what do I need? So they sound like four questions, but it's actually the first one. It's what's coming up for me right now. So, in terms of emotions, thoughts, how do I feel, right? That's so important for people pleasers. Right now, what do I want? What do I need? What is it that I'm not getting from my relationships, from my job, from my friendships? What is one thing that I truly want and need, and I'm not allowing myself to think about it? That's what I would love for people to try this exercise, because it can be life changing, when you realize that you have needs that have been overlooked for many, many, many years, and now you have the courage to look at them.
Beautiful. Yeah. I will do the journaling question as well. Now, before we end, we always end with five rapid fire questions. So these are the five questions that I ask all my guests at the end of the show. And every question has to be answered in one word or one sentence maximum.
Okay.
Right. The first question is, what is one thing you wish you knew earlier?
The balance is a thing that we need to strive. We will strive all our lives, but don't really necessarily achieve.
I love that. Yep.
Yeah. It's like healing, isn't it?
Yeah, why is it like healing?
Well, because the more you heal, the more you feel there are things to heal. So it's like,
Yeah, true. The second question is, if you could relive one day of your life, which day would it be? Like one day do over.
hmm. Oh, that sounds probably cheesy, but so since I was little, I wanted to move to London and get my first job. Sorry, you said just one word or one sentence. So the day I got my first job in a hospital in London, that I really wanted it so badly, and I got the job. I was called after 1 hour after the interview, and I was the happiest person ever.
And you want to relive that day?
I want to relive that day. Yes.
Wow, I have goosebumps. Like you have thought of this, like you have thought of this before, yourself. I love that. If you could master one skill you don't currently have, what would it be?
Sales.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, like we don't go for psychotherapists don't go for sales training, but actually we do need it. I don't know why they don't teach us how to sell ourselves, but we really need to learn that
Huh.
in the marketplace. Everyone needs to learn that
Yeah.
nowadays.
Anyway, yes, we're all selling ourselves. Anyway, the next question is: if you could instantly solve one world problem, what would it be?
Oh God, unfortunately, I'm struggling because there are so many, but probably patriarchy, dismantle it completely. That would be a better word.
Wow, it's the first time, yeah, someone gave me this answer. Yeah,
Weird.
you're unpracticable. I mean, all your question, all your answers are pretty random, I would say.
Yeah.
But I love it. The last question is: what brings you the greatest joy?
Can you hear my dog barking in the background?
Yeah.
My dog.
Oh, I think it's back for a reason.
Yeah, probably something is happening outside, but just my dog. What can I say? Do I need to explain that? Not really, right?
Yeah, love that. And your dog hears that, obviously. You said your dog.
Yes, well, in the other room.
All right, now tell my people where to follow you and learn more about your work, and maybe even the possibility of working with you. Where should I send them?
Okay, so I have an Instagram account which is Ludovica, my name underscore Colella underscore coaching. And then I have my website. All my offers and services are written there, which is Lu dash cole, so cole.com. So you can find me there.
All right. Yeah, I will put all your links in the show note below. And guys, if you're still listening, if you're still here, I know this episode hit home because this spoke to you, and so make sure you follow Ludo. Thanks for coming to our show today and dive even deeper into our work. If you have any question or have any thoughts, you can drop in the comments or you can send us a DM. We would love to hear what landed for you. And I will always leave you the same way as I leave you every other episode. Show up. The world needs you and you need you. Thanks for listening, and I wish you all a joyful and amazing day ahead. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you again for tuning into Find Joy Joyan podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, take a screenshot and share it on your IG story and take Find Joy Joyan underscore podcast so I know you are listening. And leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already done so. And remember to hit the subscribe button whether you are listening on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, or any of your other favorite platforms. If you love what we are doing and want to become one of our sponsors, you can send me a DM to connect. And thanks for being here. I will see you soon in the next episode.